Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking LSU football, and I am joined by Hunt Palmer, who is the host of the Hunt Palmer Show, and he also does pre- and post-game shows for LSU Athletics. And Hunt, I wanted to start talking about this LSU football season because I think everything is kind of, even just going back to this past offseason for LSU when Garrett Nussmeier decided to come back for his senior season at LSU because he could have went to the NFL draft. If you look at the other quarterbacks that are taking it, I think some teams probably could have talked themselves into him being a first-round pick. So how big was it having Nussmeier come back? Because it seems like if he comes back and he's just the same quarterback he was last year, LSU is a shoo-in to make the playoff.
Yeah, it's everything to have him come back. I mean, he certainly got his flaws. He's not super mobile, and he made some poor decisions against Texas A&M and Alabama last year. So he's got room to grow. But it was his first year as a starter. He sat behind Jaden Daniels for 2 years and waited his turn and got his opportunity. And I thought he played great last year. He threw for 4,000 yards. He's got the most yards returning to college football at the D1 level this year. His dad is a longtime college football and NFL coach. He's now, coincidentally, actually the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints with Kellen Moore this year. So his dad's just down the road. And if he decides to go, LSU's got a massive hole quarterback, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to fill it. But once he came back and made that decision, the booster base kind of decided, okay, we've got this guy coming back. We've got a lot of money here that was set aside, a lot of it for Bryce Underwood, quite frankly, who decided not to come to LSU at the 11th hour. Let's go get some players. And they went and ransacked the transfer portal and brought in the top transfer portal class in the country to go with what was already a pretty talented roster. But without Nussmeier, it's not nearly what it is now. There are other question marks on this team, but as far as LSU's ability to throw the ball, that's not a question. He'll be able to do that all year.
And I think the thing with Nussmeier, too, is, it's unfair to compare him to these other two guys, but people have been doing it when they compare him to, hey, look at the leap that Joe Burrow made in his second year starting at LSU. Look at the leap that Jaden Daniels made in his second year starting at LSU. It's unfair to compare Nussmeier to those guys because you're saying that, like, hey, this guy's going to play himself into being like a top 2 pick in the NFL draft this year. But I think, too, just getting a second year as the starting quarterback where he's going to be able to be reading defenses better, because that seemed like a thing that he needed to work on a little bit. Like you said, some of the decision-making stuff, and not even just, making the right passes, but making your reads faster, processing quicker. And I think year 2 as a starter, obviously sitting behind the bench too, he's going to really just, take off in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, the comparisons to Burrow and Daniels are natural because they're very recent and they were fifth-year guys, and Garrett's going to be a fifth-year guy. I mean, Garrett's 4,000 yards last year, the second highest total in the history of the school. It was more than Jaden threw for in 2023 when he won the Heisman. Now, Jaden ran for 1,000 yards and Garrett ran for negative yards. So the disparity is there in the numbers. But it was a great first year in terms of throwing the ball for Nussmeier. I try to push back because I've been watching LSU football very closely since the early 90s. And there are 2 quarterback seasons that stand so far above the other ones that it's not even worth discussion. And it's the Jaden and Joe Heisman seasons. And that's not what it's required to win a championship. You don't have to play like that. And I don't expect him to be the Heisman Trophy winner. He could, but I don't expect that from him. I expect him to, as you mentioned, clean up some of those mistakes that some were decision mistakes. I mean, they're beating Texas A&M. They're controlling the game at halftime. A&M's not moving the ball. LSU's doing kind of what it wants. And Nussmeier, on a third down play, rolls to his left, throws it back across his body for no reason. It gets picked. The crowd gets into it. A&M makes a quarterback change. They run it in for a touchdown, and LSU just fell into an avalanche after that. Against Alabama, he makes a really bad read in the red zone. LSU's got a chance to go draw within one score, and he throws it right between the face mask and the numbers of a defensive back. Like, those are the throws that he's got to clean up. He doesn't have to throw for more yards or run for 1,000 yards or win the Heisman Trophy. He just can't make the devastating mistake. And that's something that you have to learn. And it was his first time playing at the college level really last year. And the hope is that he did. He grew up, as I mentioned, in a football house. He understands the game. He understands coverages. He understands film study. And he talked to us last week in Atlanta at SEC Media Days about, you can watch Jaden run the offense. And that's one thing, and it is helpful to see how efficient he is and how quick he is with his reads and where he looks to go and when he's willing to check down and all those types of things. But doing it is a completely different thing, and especially doing it with a completely different skill set is a different thing. So Garrett's got things to work on, but he knows what they are, and I would expect him to take a leap. I'm just not ready to immediately toss him in there with Joe and Jay.
Another thing, I'm sure LSU fans obviously know this, but I think probably people that don't follow the program as closely also realize too with Joe and Jaden that they had two first round NFL wide receivers that two of them are certified superstars of the NFL. Two of them might be on their way to doing that. And kind of like what you said, Bryce Underwood decommits, goes to Michigan, and all of a sudden all this NIL space opens up. And one place that LSU decided to really invest in NIL is the wide receiver position, because really the only guy, at least that I see here, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron Anderson is the only guy that is returning. They went and got Barry and Brown out of Kentucky, who's this absolute speedster. You got Nick Anderson. Can you talk to me kind of the different additions that we had in the transfer portal on the wide receiver end? Because I think that is another huge key for how this LSU offense is going to operate this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas. That's a pretty special run of wide receivers. But LSU's made a little bit of a habit of that. It's not too far in the rearview mirror that Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham were running around together. So it's that's just they don't have any problem getting wide receivers to Baton Rouge. And you mentioned Aaron Anderson had a great year last year. And what you wouldn't have mentioned there, because he didn't play very much, is Chris Hilton. Chris Hilton came in with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas in the same class, and he was the highest rated recruit of the lot. He's been hurt for 4 years, and he had a great camp 2 years ago and got hurt. He had a great camp last year and got hurt. And last year they were missing the deep ball. They had Aaron Anderson to work the slot. They had the late Kyron Lacey, who unfortunately passed away in this offseason, but he was a great possession receiver for him. They didn't have a burner. Chris Hilton is a legit track guy. He is a burner. And he played in the last 2 games and caught a touchdown of over 40 yards in both games. He's a difference maker. He's got to stay healthy. If he does, he's going to play a big role. They brought him to SEC Media Days as one of the 3 representatives last year. You mentioned Barry and Brown set the SEC record for kickoff returns at Kentucky. Didn't put up gaudy numbers at wide receiver. It's hard to do that when your quarterback can't complete a forward pass. That doesn't lend itself to huge numbers at Kentucky. They've got one of the most anemic passing offenses in the country. Not really Barry and Brown's fault. He'll be unlocked in Baton Rouge, I'm confident. Nick Anderson is a guy they brought in from Oklahoma. He did not play last year with an injury. He set the Oklahoma freshman record for touchdown catches 2 years ago in 2023. He's 6'3", runs great. He's a deer out there that can be a real difference maker. So, yeah, as far as wide receivers go, they've got a ton of them. And they've even got Kyle Parker, who made a couple big plays last year before he got hurt. They brought in Destin Hill from Florida State, who was a 4-star recruit from New Orleans, who's been hurt. There got a lot of guys with some injury concerns in the past, but you've got enough of them to where if one of those guys, you can't count on because he's hurt, there are 5 or 6 other guys that you can turn to complete passes, and I think LSU will be just fine from that perspective.
Yeah, if you look at the offense last year, even though you said there's a lot of room for improvement, the passing game was the strength of the offense last year. You lost some guys to the NFL draft, notably Will Campbell is taken with the the 4th pick to the Patriots. But something that was kind of peculiar about LSU last year is that it just didn't run the ball that well. Should we expect an improved running game this year, even though you're losing some guys on the offensive line to the NFL, or is it going to kind of be, maybe the weak spot of this offense?
It's the biggest question entering the season on the offensive side. You had the most decorated offensive line class ever that just left. Will Campbell was a 5-star recruit. He was a left tackle from the day he set foot on campus 3 years ago. He was a consensus All-American, the 4th pick in the draft. You can make the case he's the best offensive lineman ever at LSU. I don't know if I would make that case. Alan Faneca, Kevin Maguire in the Hall of Fame, Andrew Whitworth, phenomenal as well. But you can make the case. Emory Jones started for 3 years as a freshman from the 3rd game of the season all the way through as a 3rd-round pick of the Ravens. Phenomenal. Garrett Dellinger and Miles Frazier were 5th-year players that have started for 4 years. They lost a ton of starts off that line, and those dudes were as elite in pass protection as you get. LSU was 10th in the country in pass attempts last year, and I think 6th in sacks allowed in terms of fewest. You're up there with the service academies in sacks allowed. Like nobody got to Garrett Nussmeier last year. And so they threw the ball for 4,000 yards. They were great at it. They were great on third down. They were great throwing the ball. They were really efficient. They led the SEC in completions. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't run the ball last year. They couldn't run the ball the year before that. They couldn't run the ball the year before that. The only reason that the statistics indicate they could run the ball 2 years ago is because Jaden Daniels was better than everybody on defense, and he could just run for 1,000 yards without any help from the offensive line. So they've got to fix that, and they know. So I can't tell you if they're going to be good at running the ball or not. I have no idea. What I can tell you is in going out and watching spring practice, and we got a lot of access to spring practice, it looks way different. They're running a lot of counters. They've got wide receivers in the backfield. And talent at running back's not an issue. Caden Durham was a 5-star recruit. He's a great player. Caleb Jackson was a 4-star recruit. He's a great player. They got the number 1 running back in the country in Harlem Berry that comes in this year as the third back. Like, it's not a talent issue. They couldn't block. And so it's a deal where you're overhauling the offensive line, probably with 5 completely new starters. The starting center is the only guy back on the roster, and he's probably going to move to one of the guards. So you're going to have an overhauled offensive line. They're going to try to run the ball more creatively than they have, and they have to run it better, or else they're not going to make it.
Going back to that Jaden Daniels season, the offense was spectacular, obviously, with all the numbers that he put up. But that team, the weakness of that team was that the defense wasn't that good, and that's kind of why.
It was the worst defense in the history of LSU football by a long shot. There's not even a close statistical second. It was the most inept group ever put on the field by LSU.
Yeah, well, then that brings us to last season when Blake Baker comes in to kind of reform this defense. You saw this defense take a step in the right direction. It was, middle of the road, good, not great, or maybe a little bit above average is maybe how you'd want to grade it. But where are we going to see this defense maybe take another step in the right direction to start being, good?
They might start 6 or 7 transfers in the opener from this class. I mean, they went and loaded up on transfers. They got 3 Power 5 defensive ends, Jamari Butler from Nebraska, Patrick Payton from Florida State, who had a monster career there, especially his sophomore year. Jack Pyburn from Florida comes in as well. Then they go to Texas and get Sider Mitchell on the interior of the defensive line, Bernard Gooden from Central South Florida on the defensive line. They go to the secondary. They get Mansour Lane, who's a 3-year starter at Virginia Tech. They go and get Tamarcus Cooley from NC State at safety, who's been a big-time starter. Jakeem Jackson was a 4-star recruit who's started at Florida last year, who they brought in as well. Like, they just went and spent a ton of money on the defense, on the juniors and seniors that are going to probably start on the defense. And they still got some really talented guys that come back on the team. Whit Weeks is a preseason All-American at linebacker. Harold Perkins, who most people know, who tore his ACL last year, is a super talent. And so they just went and overhauled it. And Blake Baker is a guy that Brian Kelly trusts a ton. He's got a great track record. He put 2 really good defenses on the field at Missouri with lesser talent. They got to get better. I don't know that it looks to me like a dominant LSU defense that I've seen, but it does look like one that doesn't have an obvious hole. They just got to be solid. And I think if they're solid, then LSU's offense will score enough points to win enough games.
Absolutely. And one thing, too, I wish I would have mentioned this earlier, too, because a big thing we're going to see this start to creep up when we start looking at week 1 previews in the college football season. And that is that LSU, was it 5 straight season openers that they have lost predating Brian Kelly in his tenure at LSU. Now that is a little bit misleading. LSU is scheduling some very talented football teams to start the season. They obviously had 2 back-to-back years where they're playing Florida State. Last year was against USC, who didn't necessarily finish the season that well, but they looked like a pretty darn good team when they played against LSU. Well, this year is not getting any easier as a season opener, going to Clemson, going to a different Death Valley. How important is it to win that opening game?
How long we got?
All day,
look,
man.
It's just massive. They've made a big deal out of it. They've been outspoken. They've been candid. They've got Clemson Tiger paw prints in the weight room. They are hell bent to try to start this thing 1-0. It's horrendous scheduling to put these games on the schedule. It's great for college football fans. It draws a lot of attention to you. You make some money going to Vegas or whatever. It's completely unnecessary, and it has been a massive detriment to LSU's football program. Now, you can say to be the man, you got to beat the man. And that's a great cliche to say, and it sounds big and tough, and it sounds competitive, and it's dumb because you don't. Indiana proved that last year. To be the man, you just have to beat somebody. And if you'd go play Louisiana Lafayette or Louisiana Tech or Rice instead of Clemson and Florida State, you would win. Now, there are people at LSU that will say, well, we just got to get better. You got to win the games. And they did win all of them. From 2002 to 2016, they won all these non-conference games. They had the longest non-conference regular season winning streak in the country. But you're putting yourself at unnecessary risk, putting these games on the schedule that there's no proof they benefit. There's no proof that winning this game is going to make you jump over a 2-loss team if you're a 3-loss team because you scheduled up. So, yeah, LSU's got to figure it out. They got to go play better, and they got to do something to win a game. But I would suggest that's the third most difficult game LSU is allowed to put on its schedule. You could put at Ohio State on your schedule, which is probably tougher. You could put at Oregon on your schedule, which is probably tougher. Maybe Penn State, but that's it. And LSU has done this, and I think it's ridiculous, but here we go again.
Is that a discussion that's going on with LSU fans? Like, is it a good idea or a bad idea to schedule these games?
It's split. You've got people that feel like me,
Yeah.
and you've got people that say, no, you just got to get better. You got to win the game. So the same people that wanted to play Alabama again in the national championship game instead of Oklahoma State, and Alabama beats you 21-0. If Oklahoma State shows up, LSU would have won the game by 30, which is what they did to Oregon and what they did to West Virginia and all the other teams that weren't Nick Saban's Alabama team. And there's no reason to try to run through the wall when you can just open the door and walk through it. It's just it's split down here, and I don't think moving forward that LSU is going to be in a hurry to schedule a lot of these games. But this one's on the schedule, and there's no running from it now.
Exactly. And two, like adding on to that, like you guys had no breaks in the SEC schedule this year. It goes Florida, at Ole Miss, South Carolina, at Vanderbilt, which is not a pushover anymore, Texas A&M, Alabama. I mean, Arkansas, Oklahoma, we don't know really what type of teams you'll be getting at the end of the season. They might look a little bit different now than they will be at that point. So like, yeah, it's kind of, if you lose that opening game, which again is like, it's not like a reasonable loss. You're going to Clemson. This is probably Dabo's best Clemson team since Trevor Lawrence was going to school there. So definitely a tough way to start the season. And also too, kind of to your point, if Clemson loses that game, they have an easier path through their schedule to get to the playoff than LSU would. But getting to kind of the point with the schedule and if you were to lose that first game. And I want to talk about Brian Kelly because he made big waves when he comes to LSU after being at Notre Dame. He leaves Notre Dame before it's a possibility that they could have even made the playoff in his final year at Notre Dame, heads down to LSU, gets the big contract, is making TikToks with recruits. And, there's been a lot of good moments in this early, the first few seasons at LSU. We've went over some of the bright spots with the offense, some of the down spots with the defense. Obviously, with that big of a contract and the buyout, Brian Kelly's not on the hot seat, I would say. And I don't think I don't think there would even be any possibility he could get his contract bought out this year. But my question would be, like, what level of patience do LSU fans have with Brian Kelly right now?
The fan base?
Yeah.
If LSU loses the first game, he'll have an approval rating hovering around 8%. I mean, it'll be pitchforks and fires around here. They're just sick of losing the first game. As you mentioned, he's not about to get fired. They're not cutting him a check for $55 million in December of this year to go spend that $55 million on him when they're already paying Ed Ogeron, and you got to pay a new coach $80 million, and then you got to pay a new roster, whatever the NIL is. There's just not enough money in this state to just keep cutting checks to fire coaches. So it's a big year for him, and the fan base will turn if he loses 3 games this year. Even more than there are some people that don't approve right now. But everybody will forget that when they kick it off against Clemson and be locked into that thing. But if he loses 3 games this year, there will be a portion of the fan base that will turn on him and won't be back until they can make the playoffs. And you look at next year's roster, and like, I haven't done the math on this. I'll have to do it before they start. But if you talk 22 starters, there won't be 7 that come back to next year's team because it's such an old roster outside of really the offensive line, which is going to start to guys that are out of eligibility. So it's a team that is not going to return a lot of starters for 2026. This is a year they got to make a push, and it starts at a really tough spot.
I agree. I think that I do think that this team though is in a very good situation if they can kind of get out of this. I mean, if you win the first game, like sky's the limit on this team. We're going to be talking about them going really, really far. They could be like, number one in the country after that game. That could be what the deciding factor is in that game. I guess we haven't seen all the preseason polls yet to see where everyone's situated, but I do want to ask you like one last question before I get you out of here, Hunt. Is Alabama LSU's biggest rival?
Alabama is LSU's biggest rival in the fan base right now. The deal with LSU, and it's a huge advantage to LSU not to have a rival because it means that you don't have anyone to fight off recruits for in state. If you're a big time recruit in Louisiana, like LSU is generally first on the list. They don't get them all, but they get most of them. And that's a huge advantage. But it also comes with the fact that you don't have a rival. Like Alabama fans care way more about Auburn and way more about Tennessee than they care about LSU. Fans care most about Alabama. You look at Ole Miss and LSU as a rivalry. It was real heavy in the 50s and 60s, but Mississippi State's right there. And you look at LSU's got a long-standing rivalry with Florida, but they've got Florida State and Georgia and Tennessee that they've been dealing with in their division.
And Miami too.
So that's the way. LSU and A&M was a rivalry when they finished the season. And A&M's obviously got Texas that they've got. So nobody hates LSU the most. LSU, yes, would concern themselves with Alabama, but it's cyclical. My dad's decades were Alabama for Bear Bryant. My childhood, it was Tommy Tuberville and Auburn, the winner of that game before Saban got to Tuscaloosa, generally won the SEC West. Saban started winning at Alabama. That game became the biggest. So that's the biggest if you talk to my grandparents' generation. Ole Miss was the biggest, like I mentioned. So it's cyclical with LSU. But right now, yeah, you poll 100 LSU fans, who do you hate the most? You're going to get 85 Alabamas probably.
That's amazing. Hunt, we're out of time here today. Do you want to tell us where we can find you on all of your social media and where people can listen to you, and then we'll get out of here?
Yeah, happy to. Hunt Palmer 88 is my Twitter or X handle, as it were. Then we're on YouTube, wherever you find your podcast, Hunt Palmer Show, talking a lot of LSU sports and Saints as well.
Incredible, man. Thank you so much. Anyone that's watching this video, make sure you hit subscribe, leave a comment what you think LSU is going to do this season, and feel free to check out other videos on this channel. We're doing a lot of different college football previews right now. If you watch this video and you watched it because you wanted to watch LSU suffer, you wanted to start getting receipts, feel free to leave a comment what other previews we should do heading into the season. We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Thank you for watching.